Hello everyone and welcome to another video with me, 320 Sim Pilot. Today we are taking another look at the JustFlight Warrior II for Microsoft Flight Simulator. This is of course a general aviation single engine piston aircraft often used by training schools. It's something that many of us encounter at some point in our flying careers. Even if you don't fly professionally, it's quite likely any sort of trial flights or first lessons towards your PPL will be in an aircraft like this or similar to this. So a very interesting addition and great to have it in the simulator, especially for those of you trying to reenact those first flights, just as I remember doing when I first flew and had to jump straight into a simulator to try it out. We've already used this aircraft in a preview on the channel, but now we have Sim Update 5 out and an updated version of the Warrior II, so I want to make sure we give it its full credit and take a look at it now it's been released and all the features have been fleshed out and completed. So we're going to take a look at a bit more in depth at some of the systems included, the EFB, the performance of the aircraft and so on. Today we're going to be flying in Scotland, so let's jump into the video. So for this flight I wanted to do something a little different. We're going to take off from Inverness up in northern Scotland. I know we have been there before on the channel, but a very beautiful part of the world to fly general aviation and VFR. Although this is a very marginal VFR day, as we will see. But we're going to take off from Inverness Airport just to the northeast, head along to the town visually, then we'll head down the loch and finally land in at this small little airstrip down here called Fort Augustus Airstrip. So it should be a nice flight, only about just over 20 minutes. This is obviously being Loch Ness, so we'll keep our eyes peeled during the flight. And it gives us a huge visual cue, which should make this really quite simple for this little sector. The weather is going to be live, but yeah, it's pretty nasty today, so we might have to do a little bit of cloud dodging. And it's not very wise to head down into a valley in low clouds, so we may have to adjust the weather slightly. We shall see. So let's jump into the flight. So this livery was included with the Warrior II. This one also has the wheel spats, so these are optional and we'll see how to change that using the inbuilt electronic tablet. The tie downs and chocks are also included and you can turn them on and off, as well as a tow bar at the front. The doors are animated as well, which is very nice. The texturing has always been very good on the JustFlight general aviation aircraft, and this one's no exception. We have really nice, I believe they're PBR textures on the wings and fuselage and all over the place, which gives us this nice shiny effect for the wing, the nice matte effect on the grip pad or strip, which you can actually walk on. And then we have suitable amounts of grime around the rest of the airplane. These would obviously be training aircraft, so they are going to be particularly well used and rugged appearing perhaps. Something that's nice as well is that you can get really close to the cockpit in this outside view without it popping in and out, which it used to do on in the older days of Microsoft Flight Simulator. So yeah, they've done a really nice job. You can get right up close and just there you see the change over into the actual virtual cockpit. That's a little graphical trick that's used quite regularly in most of the aircraft I've seen actually. But there we go. So it is looking really nice sat here even on this gloomy day. Normally I film these in bright sunshine to give them the best chance, but this one looks absolutely spot on. Let's have a look at what we get with this airplane to actually change and customize. So this is how you find it when you've loaded up. And what we're going to do is, first of all, I'm going to show you the aircraft state at the top left. So the EFB you can turn on or off. Very useful to have. Makes all sorts of strange noises. So I'm going to show you one of my favorites that I've ever heard in a JustFlight add-on. If you listen carefully, you'll hear it announce the state that I've selected.
Cold and dark selected. Ready for start selected. Ready for takeoff selected.
So these panel states are particularly good. They're very robust. So what I mean by that is they really do work. You click on it, it happens, and that includes the engine starting or stopping, which I really like. Ready for start, you just click it, all works right away. Airplane's ready to go, ready for takeoff. There we go. So really nice to have those options there. This is a simple enough aeroplane, but there's still a few things you can get wrong. And if you go cold and dark, look at that, the mixture goes to cut off and everything. So very, very impressed and pleased with those. So yeah, thumbs up for that, very pleased. Maintenance, we can refill the oil, recharge the battery, and I'm going to put enabled for the warnings. If you don't do that, it won't bother failing it, but we can actually run out of oil, or we could run the battery flat here and we would need to recharge it. So I'm going to leave those enabled. Makes it a little bit more challenging at times. Co-pilot, it's optional. There you go. You can see the weight adjusted. Not sure if that changes the outside view. Well, there's someone in the left hand, sorry, the right hand seat. But there we go. And we've got the auto fuel selector. The Piper has a left and a right fuel tank and an off position, and you have to change this to the right selector that you want, which tank you want to use. So obviously, eventually, if you leave it on one tank, you'll actually start draining the fuel unevenly, get the airplane slightly out of balance, and then potentially run out of fuel in that tank. So they provide you with the auto option, as we've seen in previous aircraft. I'm going to turn that off. I quite like having the challenge of a Piper of doing that. Cessnas, by the way, often have a single selector that does both tanks much better, I think. But there we go. GPS, we can select 3 options. The GPS 100, which I do not know how to use. They do include instructions, GPS dual, and my favorite setup, which is the Garmin 530, and then the older style radio panels. HSI enabled. HSI is this instrument down here, and you can have it as a more simple direction indicator. This is a horizontal situation indicator where we can select a VOR radial here and have it provide us an ILS indication as well. However, if we just set it to this direction indicator, it literally is just a gyroscope. It's not even slaved, I believe. We're going to have to correct it ourselves and set our own little heading bug. So quite straightforward. I'm going to go with the direction indicator today because we're not going to use much of the VOR tracking. Then we can select the yokes, but you can actually just click on the click points as you'd expect. And here I'm going to get rid of the chocks, tie downs, and if I turn off the wheel fairings, there you go, we get a more Warrior II looking airplane. So I think we'll go without them today, keep it as basic as possible, and then you can open up the doors yourself. They do of course close the proper way. You can close it there, click it to lock, and make sure it's latched on the top as well, otherwise it will sit slightly ajar and make noise. Same for the baggage door. Great stuff. So that is most of what I wanted to show you on the EFP. Let's crack on with starting up the airplane. As you would expect, you get a checklist with this airplane. I'm a big fan of these. I think they're really good and well deserved for the customer in a payware add-on. So as ever, great to see JustFlight have included it. So we put the parking brake on, avionics master off. Lots of different checks here. So you can run through it absolutely properly, which is ideal, and you would do your flight controls check and all sorts of things, just like you would on the aircraft. Even includes the exterior walk around before engine start and so on. But what I'm going to do is just jump to the cold engine start. So we're going to open up the throttle a little bit. Then we're going to turn on the battery and the alternator. Then we're going to turn on the nav lights, which we'll do here so people outside can see it. Turn on the fuel pump, and here's what always happens. Mixture goes to rich. Then we see a bit of fuel pressure, so that's good. But this is a bit more straightforward than some of the other airplanes. So mixture rich, propeller clear, ignition start. So all pretty much as you'd expect. We don't want to turn on the avionics yet because we want to make sure the airplane is up and running. So we open our little window. We shout out to all of these people standing around. Clear prop. And then we're going to run that starter. I'll just let you enjoy the audio. Great stuff. So starter warning light is out. That means the starter motor has disengaged. If it doesn't, there's a risk of it catching fire because it's sat there grinding away at RPM with the engine, which is no good, high RPM. We've got oil pressure, over here, crucially in the green. So there is oil going around the engine. It won't overheat and catch fire. We've got fuel pressure, obviously, oil temperature cold because it is just started up. Close that window now. It's raining out there, so we don't want to get too involved with that. But there you go. So very straightforward, and you can, of course, continue to follow on with the checklist should you so choose. What I'm going to do is actually just cheat, just to make sure everything's in the right place and just to demonstrate it. So we start at the engine, but I'm just going to put the airplane as ready for takeoff. Turns on a few more of the things, make sure that the GPSs and so on are all on. Does actually turn off some of the lighting, so I'll turn those back on myself. You'll notice down here there's an autopilot panel, which we're going to see as we get going. And nice, of course, as ever, to see little details like if we do our power checks. Obviously, you do these somewhere out at the runway, 2000 RPM, for example. Then we drop one of the magnetos, so we just run on one that set. There is an RPM drop associated with it, as you would expect. So that sort of detail modeled. EGT up here as well. You you see that it's risen and it's continuing to rise slightly, and if I come back to idle, it reduces down again. You can test these warning lights, they all work. Very similar to the other general aviation Piper aircraft we've seen. A nice one down here is the alternator amp instrument. So if I turn off the anti-collision lights, you see it drop. If I turn off the pitot heat, you see it drop. So that's modelled. So what we're seeing here is we are seeing the needle move up and down according to how much current is being drawn through it, how many amps. Great. Let's taxi out, get ourselves into the air, and head off down for this very scenic but slightly bad weather flight. Taxiing the Warrior is as easy as you would expect. We have idle power on here. It gently rolls forward. What's nice is that, as you'll see, even if we bring it to a stop, that the propeller wash does actually push those rain droplets back slightly. And it does speed up when you add power. So nice to see all these little details built in. But yeah, it's very straightforward. The pedals more aggressively than I would imagine in the real airplane, but I haven't flown a Warrior for a long time. I know some general aviation airplanes, the steering attached to the pedals is not quite as precise as that. But there we go. And the cat has joined us just in time for takeoff, of course. We're going to go with one stage of flap. Another detail I like for the sound. I've seen this before, but I always enjoy it. Always nice to have the the loud noise of the window going. Right, let's get ourselves out onto the runway and underway. The weather has deteriorated sadly, so I'm not sure how VFR we're going to be able to remain, but we'll give it our best shot. I think it's warm enough not to be too concerned about icing, but we do need to keep visual contact with the ground. That is, by the way, way too fast to drive it around. This is a ground handling issue in Microsoft Flight Simulator where they behave a bit like go-karts. The braking's good though. The braking's very, very realistic. It doesn't apply instantly. That was, let's just give you a demonstration. If I squeeze fully down on the brakes, here we go. I'm going to squeeze fully down now. There you go. It sort of grinds to a halt, but it's not too responsive. Whilst this vehicle decides to get out of the way, just want to show off another little sound detail that I really do enjoy. And what I'll do is just give you the audio and show you. So as you heard, as you move directly behind the propeller, you get the whoosh sort of noise, a bit like you're listening through a microphone. But it is accurate when you stand behind one of these airplanes. Obviously, you do get blasted with air coming off that propeller. So nice to see that model as well. Sky looking less forgiving than I'd hoped. Let's give it a go. Before we go, I'm just going to line up my direction indicator here. You can see that I can correct it like that. It does seem to pretty much stay in line, but we'll see how long that lasts. It's at 0 degrees, so showing 03, 04, is that 052-ish as a heading, or on runway 05, so that makes sense. On the whiskey compass, it goes 03, 04, 05, just over 052. This operates slightly in reverse, which is always a frustration of using one of those compasses, but that's how they are. They've been used as standby instruments, and the Airbus has one just like it, tucked away in the overhead panel. So we're going to increase the power. We can take off with full throttle, this being a Warrior. So there's full power there, and we are rolling. Fantastic sound effects as ever. Once you're underway, the nose wheel sort of steering does start to feel a little bit better. Get to about 60 knots. Getting some gusts there. Goodness me. Right, we're up in the air. That's probably a good thing. And no gear to bring up, so we'll climb away. I'm going to trim for about 75 initially. We've got some flaps out. We'll get to about 400 feet above the ground, and I'll bring those in as well. Now this is more underpowered. I say underpowered. This has less power than the other aircraft, the JustFlight Arrow 3. So it's definitely noticeable, which is nice. Great to have that different feel to it. This is full power, as you can see. We'll bring those flaps up now and let it settle in. We're going to turn to the southwest, so I'm going to make a big left-hand turn around. So it's all clear. Let's give it a go. we're going to climb up to pretty much whatever we can manage beneath these clouds, I think, for the mission today. As ever with general aviation, you don't really get the idea of quite how bad it is until you're up in the air. So this is a sort of view I would definitely be thinking, well, I might not leave the circuit today. We might be going straight back in for another landing. It's not too windy, it's just very poor visibility. Lots of heavy rain showers around, which you can sort of see, obviously caused by these dark clouds sitting above us. So we have the luxury that we can adjust that as we required. So let's head off and do a bit of flying through Loch Ness. As ever, absolutely stunning graphics on the weather. I always talk about it, but I can't resist. I mean, look at that. Absolutely glorious, with a gap of blue sunshine just bursting through there. Brilliant. Beautiful part of the world to be flying in as well. So we're cruising along now. I'm just about level at 2,000 feet, if I can get it under control. So a bit of the old attitude. So lower the nose, bring the power back to 2200 RPM for a cruise of about 90 knots. And trim. And we'll trim ourselves for level flight here. We're leaving the circuit now. I'm going to leave the pitot heat on just because it's pretty humid out there. I'm going to run the carb heat because I haven't been running at high power. It shouldn't have been an issue, but there we go. It says anti-ice engine, quite good. It's not quite, but it's it will anti-ice the carburetor. And then I'm also going to turn off the fuel pump and leave and turn off the landing lights. In fact, there we go. Right, so now we're going to head down for our short little hop. We have our GPS working over here because I'm using the 530 system. You could of course tune the ADF using the ADF over here, and the DME could be tuned as well. So lots of the standard general aviation nav aid options all included. You might be wondering, well, how am I going to enjoy this airplane on a more serious trek if I wanted to take it a bit cross country? Look at those showers over there. So we're doing alright so far actually, but yeah, it could get hard to navigate pretty soon. Well, we do have an autopilot down here. Very simple. Autopilot on. I'm going to put it into heading mode. Make sure that this is definitely in line. Court gyro correction should be basically at 0. That's reading about 200. That's reading about 200. And then your heading bug will work. So we're going to head sort of southwest as we are. So actually I'll leave it about here. And we can see from our Garmin that that will take us roughly towards our purple line. There is a nav mode instead of heading, so we could engage nav, and then if I make sure it's set, instead of Vorlock to GPS, I'm hoping it's making a left turn and it will fly us along our magenta line. So there you go. You could, of course, if you used the HSI, you'd have the course bar available on there. Finally, you can see our altitude's dropped by about 700 feet while I've been trying to work out what was going on there. So let's get ourselves climbing again. Weather has definitely deteriorated, so this would be a good time to try and make sure you do not get below your minimum safe altitude. Just about getting the town of Inverness visible beneath us. Hopefully we'll keep that in sight as we head out. Now this is no longer VFR conditions. This is not something you would want to do in real life, and I can't stress that enough. Getting lost into a shower during a VFR flight to the point where you can't really see where you're going is not ideal. Okay, so we're back at 2,000 feet. Let's do the usual attitude. Power, 2200 RPM. And then trim. Bit of nose down trim, keep us level. And now we do have a cheat mode autopilot hold. Sorry, altitude hold. So you can click this little button here, which I'm not sure what it's for in the real aircraft. And it doesn't show up, but it does actually hold the altitude. And it tells you by hovering the mouse, so it says enabled. I can also get rid of this carb heat, which does increase the RPM slightly, so I'll just reset 2200. And there we go, we're now navigating along our line. So you can see how quickly and easily you can turn this into a relatively well-controlled aeroplane. You'll notice now that the picture out the front, very confusing because of the poor visibility. It looks like we've got a bit of a climb on, but actually if you look at the instruments, we haven't. Right, what I want to do now is, if you look at our fuel, we've burnt more on the left tank. We have 10 gallons left in the left tank and a bit more, about 12 in the right. All I have to do is go to the... Actually, before I do that, we turn the fuel pump on. get a bit of a amp draw. Then I'm going to turn that to the right tank. And now it will start draining fuel out of that right hand tank. As I said, we don't have the auto fuel selector enabled, so I'm doing this myself. Now I really was hoping that at some point we would get a better view for you guys to see. We are soon going to be reaching the lock. As you can see, our line takes us right down it. As you can see, magically through the power of simulator, the weather has improved. If we look up here, we've got our temperature gauge showing a nice temperature of just over 10 degrees Celsius, but definitely in the carburetor icing range, especially with all this moisture out here. So I'm going to run that carb heat again. The slight RPM drop as we put hot air into the carburetor. Otherwise, all running as expected. If you've seen my preview video build, this will be of no surprise to you. It is functioning very well in its more complete and updated version. This is also functioning in Sim Update 5 now. They did update it and it seems to be working very nicely, so that's great to see. Excellent frame rates, of course, as you'd expect for a relatively simple airplane, but not guaranteed ever. There are a lot of things going on in the background and that we don't know about as end users of these sorts of aircraft. For my workings, this aircraft is of course compatible with virtual reality. What is really nice is that the performance is not affected, as you would hope, but not all aircraft are like that. So I get smooth performance in virtual reality. I'm running this on an i7-10700K and an RTX 3080, which I appreciate is quite a high-end graphics card, but just for comparison, the performance I get in virtual reality is as smooth as what I would find in the normal simulator. Something else I like is that it's a very good virtual reality cockpit. The mouse pointer does indeed sit at the correct parts of the screen in the correct perspective, so you don't have that issue where in some aircraft you have to close one eye before you can see which instrument the mouse is actually interacting with, but they've done a great job here. The mouse actually moves over the instruments in the correct way, and you can keep both your eyes open and you'll see where it's going to click, which makes it so much easier to use this aircraft in virtual reality. So yeah, an absolute thumbs up for those of you trying to fly it in virtual reality from me. Okay, we're now finally arriving at our destination. I've not been here before, Echo Golf Victor Zulu, but it should be coming up on the nose, so we'll keep our eyes peeled for it. As we prepare to enter the circuit, I'm going to check I'm on the right fuel tank, so I'm currently balanced on each side, slightly more in the left tank. So I'm going to leave it as it is, just let the right drain a little bit more. Let's run the carb heat, mixture's up to rich. Going to get the fuel pump back on, going to put the landing light on for entering the circuit, and zoom in on the GPS just to cheat. There's the airfield. So autopilot coming out. Hopefully the disconnect button works. Yes, it does. The normal, my default assigned autopilot disconnect key works, which is great. And we'll go and bring ourselves off to the right to try and fly into this valley, give ourselves a better view of it. I'm not going to descend too low because obviously the terrain around us is significantly higher than we might otherwise like. Let's see if we can spot it. There is an airstrip down here, most certainly. Maybe we'll try and go there. So we'll descend on this side and then get ourselves down and in. If you're seeing any stuttering, it's because of Microsoft Flight Simulator's VSync not behaving like it should. The frame rate on my actual simulator is running very smoothly. It's just sadly the recording software can't quite keep up with that in the same way. Okay, so we're going to turn ourselves for our own little downwinds. This is a beautiful part of the world to fly. We definitely should have come up here and done some of this before. Power right back now. Carb heat's on. That's fine. So bump brakes are off. Undercarriage is down. Mixture is rich. Propeller is at max RPM. Pitch, we've got the flaps up now, which is fine. Fuel is on the fullest tank-ish with the fuel pump on. Instruments are all set. We're on the QNH. Carb heat is on. Hatches and harnesses are secure. Okay. Interesting approach to this airfield. We're going to have to work our way around some of the high terrain out there. It is always nice to hand fly this aircraft. Just to give you a little demonstration, let's put it up to a stall now, just so you can see that in action. It should be relatively benign. We found that there was a bit of a wing drop tendency in the the preview version we used. Let's see if that's still there. So using no rudder, no aileron, full backstick. There's a stall warner. Using a bit of rudder just to keep the wings level. And there we go, just sort of mashing out of the sky. Pretty benign, very hard to get it to drop a wing. So that seems good. That seems improved from the version that we had before, which would drop a wing a bit more than the real aircraft would like to. So that's very nice. Yeah, really nice to see that improved. Right, let's get ourselves back and around for landing. So we'll go for our first stage of flat. Of course, stalling at this stage is a very dangerous game. Certainly something we are going to do our best to avoid. Probably should gain a bit of altitude. There's the runway coming into view over there. So this should work out nicely, he says, bravely. Gonna get that speed right back now. Gonna trim for 70 knots and get the rest of the flap out. So turning final. Here's the flap. Needing a bit of nose down trim. Keeping the power on. Bit fast there, bit high, so power coming back. Let's get rid of that carb heat. See if we can get down over that tree line. There's 70 knots. Our computer over here does tell us we have 2 knots of tailwind component. Not a problem, but just of note. It looks like a long runway, but it could just be very narrow, so you have to be a little bit careful with that. I think we'll actually run out of runway quite easily. Okay, power's back. There you go. Someone was obviously taking off when they took the footage. Into the flare. Don't want to drag this out too long. There's touchdown. Quite easy to slow down on grass runways. They tend to slow aeroplanes, especially tricycle gear, nice and quickly. And there we go. So that's all for today's video, just a bit of fun trying out the latest update to the Warrior II and seeing the final product. As I said, we previously just used the preview build, so nice to see it complete. A really great General Aviation aircraft add-on. If you've already got one of the other arrows or the turbo arrow, there is a discount available. It's entirely going to be user preference as to whether they think they need several in their fleet or not. But this is certainly a particularly interesting aircraft, being the one that so many people would have learnt to fly on. So that's why it's very nice to have it here. There'll be plenty more guides, videos, previews and tutorials coming on the channel, as well as live streams. So do please subscribe if you'd like to see more of those. Otherwise, we'll see you again in another of those videos or live streams. Thank you very much for watching. Bye bye.